evening, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you for your presence at this very important event. It's a delight. Can you hear me now? Yes? All right. It's a privilege and honor to have your presence here. Thank you very much for being with us and for this very special occasion. I'm very honored to have you. It's very hard to refer to names because I might embarrass myself because there are so many distinguished personalities in our community attending this important event of the opening of the Law Library at Sheridan. But before I have my very brief remarks. I have only about 20 pages to read. I'll have Darren giving us the acknowledgement, also referring to safety issues about exit doors and so forth. Thank you. Darren, do you need this microphone?
I have a fairly loud voice anyway. Let me add my welcome to Augusto's welcome today. Thank you very much for coming and being here for this important event. I have a couple of words to say just about our acknowledgement of country. At this time, we respectfully acknowledge the traditional custodians of the land on which we live, work, study and call home. In his great wisdom and love, our Heavenly Father gave this land to the Whadjuk people of the Noongar Nation. We pay tribute to their elders past and present, who've cared for his creation with respect and reverence over countless generations. As we continue to learn to live together on this land, we pray that we can leave a legacy of reconciliation, justice and hope for all Australians. And we pray that God will unite us all in the knowledge of his Son, Jesus Christ, in whom and for whom all things were created. Now, I've just got a couple of words to go through.
Of course,
right.
please, take your time.
Baptists are a very small minority in Australia. We make up about 1.4% of the population, less even than Australia's Indigenous population, which is about 3.8%. We were birthed in the 1600s by a personal act of dissent against the Church of England, and were quickly labelled nonconformists, persecuted by the state for our pursuit of religious freedom. In the light of reading this acknowledgement of country, I'd like to briefly share a story with you. The Reverend John Sanders was the founder of the Baptist Church in Australia. 185 years ago, 2 years after Reverend Saunders arrived in the colony, word came to Sydney of a very savage massacre of Indigenous Australian women and children at Mile Creek. When the stockmen directly responsible for the massacre were arrested and charged, elite opinion in Sydney went ballistic. Influential landowners and politicians ferociously defended the stockmen and condemned the troopers making the arrest. The Sydney Morning Herald editorialised in the stockmen's favour, arguing that the lives of Indigenous Australians were not as important as the lives of British colonists because they were animals, not human. In the midst of this febrile atmosphere, the Reverend John Saunders rose to his feet, stood before his Baptist congregation and preached from the text Isaiah 26:21. Using a more modern translation, the verse is, "The Lord is coming from his heavenly dwelling place to punish the people of earth for their sins. The murders that were secretly committed on the earth will be revealed, and the ground will no longer hide those who have been killed." Arguing from the Bible and from natural law, the Reverend Saunders began his sermon with this task, gruesome to us today, of logically dismantling the specious claim that Indigenous Australians were not human, and therefore their deaths did not matter as much as the deaths of British settlers. Saunders then outlined the litany of crimes committed by white settlers against Indigenous Australians. And this is in 1838, mind you. And it includes the seizure of their land and destruction of their livelihood. We descended as invaders upon his territory and took possession of the soil. The brutalisation of their lives through deliberate and systematic supply of alcohol. We brought the art of intoxication to them. We encouraged them to licentiousness and self-destroying profligacy. And then outright murder. The musket, the bayonet and the sword and the poison damper. Britain hath avenged the death of her sons, not by law, but by retaliation at the atrocious disproportion of 100 to 1. Saunders, the Baptist that he was, declared that British colonial Australia was collectively under the judgment of God, and that we had grown rich from our crimes and that the only way to escape God's wrath was repentance for our sins and restitution from our accumulated wealth. Saunders' sermon was subsequently published in The Colonist, one of the few media outlets that condemn those responsible for the massacre. I have Professor Ross Clifford from Moreland College in New South Wales to thank for this piece of Baptist history. The full sermon is published online, and if you're a Baptist, I commend it to you. I've also since learned that Meredith Leigh covers this sermon extensively in her book, The Bible in Australia, A Cultural History, which won the 2019 Prime Minister's Australian History Prize. I share that story with you because you're gathered here in a little Baptist college at the beginning of its days, and perhaps you're wondering, what is Sheridan going to be? Well, we don't fit the neat categories of modern Australian politics because the Bible, not ideology, is our starting point. We believe in human dignity because the Bible declares that all people are made in the image of God. We prize democratic government because it is for freedom that Christ has set us free.
Amen. Amen.
We have a strong sense of justice that is derived from personal conviction of our own sin against God. The best of the Baptists, from the Reverend John Saunders, Reverend Martin Luther King Jr., Lottie Moon, John Leland, Catherine Scott, Roger Williams, John Bunyan, Mrs. Attaway, Thomas Helwys, have also been possessed of a moral clarity that puts them into conflict with the authorities and opinion makers of the day. Plainly speaking, we're a bit annoying. Many of us would prefer to live quietly and live and let live. However, when people are robbed of their dignity and livelihood, when freedom of conscience and association are unreasonably constrained, when the rule of law is undermined and justice fails the victim, well, you can expect that dissenting spirit to re-emerge. And certainly a blistering sermon or two to go along with it. Thank you for being here tonight, and I hope you enjoyed it.
That was a wonderful, wonderful speech, a wonderful beginning of the proceedings. And I must say that the list of speakers is quite impressive, so I'm very honored to have your presence. We have to understand that the Lord Mayor is a very busy man, and he is going to deliver his speech. He's the second on the list. But after his speech, we are proceeding to the other room in order to have him unveiling the plaque that opens the law library. So, and then we will be returning to this room for the continuation of the proceedings of the speakers. I will give you the list of speakers. The first person happens to be yours truly, but after this, the Right Honourable the Lord Mayor Basil Zempilas will be the second, followed by Leigh Warnick, Senior Counsel, very prestigious barrister in Western Australia, and then Lorraine Finlay, Human Rights Commissioner. Professor Phil Evans, very honored by your presence, who was the Law Dean at Murdoch University. And then the star of this event, the event is, we are very honored to have him on the board of our LLB Advisory Board. Thank you very much, Gabriel, for your generosity and for donating your books, the books from your library, to Sheridan. We are very honored to have you here, and I have more to say about your legacy very soon. But the opening of Professor Gabriel Moens Law Library is associated with Sheridan's LLB course being approved just by the federal agency, the Tertiary Education Quality and Standards Agency. It's called TEXA. Sheridan is delighted with this progress towards its ambitious goal of teaching high-quality LLB in Western Australia. But at the moment, we are still waiting for the professional accreditation of the course coming from the Legal Practice Board. So it's not time to talk about we having a law school. We haven't yet. The LLB course at Sheridan has been approved indeed by TEXA, the relevant regulatory agency, for 7 years, which is quite excellent, because this is the maximum accreditation period that can be granted by the federal regulator. TEXA acknowledges that Sheridan has produced a robust LLB program which meets all the existing requirements and compares favorably to other LLB programs. Australia Baptist Education is the sponsoring organization behind the establishment of Sheridan Institute of Higher Education in Perth CBD. The Baptist Church is one of the most well-known denominations in Protestant Christianity. Worldwide, there are more than 100 million who belong to a Baptist community. In Western Australia, Baptists have demonstrated an outstanding capacity for establishing and operating large not-for-profit institutions over the last 30 years. For example, Baptist Care employs over 1,000 staff and has an annual turnover of more than $50 million. Baptists also draw on extensive experience in languages and cross-cultural studies through its international mission and programs. With regard to education, Baptists are the third largest provider of private education in Western Australia, after the Anglican and Catholic churches. More than 10,000 students and 900 staff now study and work in open-entry Baptist schools. The combined total capital investment in Baptist education exceeds $80 million, with combined gross revenue of $70 million a year. Sheridan Institute of Higher Education is a tertiary education provider grounded in the Baptist tradition. Baptists have a rich inheritance in higher education and are involved in the establishment of a number of independent schools and colleges in England, including founding Bristol College and several other institutions in the United States. For instance, the University of Chicago, Brown University, and Temple University were founded by Baptists. And others, such as Baylor University, Mercer University, and Union University, still remain a strong Baptist, with very strong Baptist identity today, to this very day. The International Association of Baptist Colleges and Universities brings together more than 40 Baptist higher education institutions in the United States, Asia, and Africa. Baptists are traditionally driven by unwavering commitment to the common good, which is wedded to the principles of religious freedom and freedom of conscience. They are also committed to defending the basic right of individuals to freely associate with one another on the basis of shared beliefs and to separate from each other if those beliefs diverge. Accordingly, Sheridan's statement, our statement of Sheridan of academic freedom, notes that the Baptists were at the forefront of the struggle for fundamental rights and freedoms. The origin of Sheridan's commitment to academic freedom is found in a fractious group of English exiles living in Amsterdam in the 17th century. In confrontational tracts and sermons, those first Baptists were amongst the earliest advocates for three foundational principles of democracy, namely freedom of conscience, freedom of speech, and freedom of association. These principles continue to have immense relevance in the 21st century, and it is in this context of its rich Baptist heritage that Sheridan affirms its commitment to the important and necessary principle of academic freedom. Sheridan currently offers undergraduate programs in business, science, and humanities and social sciences, in addition to postgraduate courses in business administration and education. While Sheridan is financially independent of state and federal government funding, one of its core commitments is to reduce financial barriers to quality higher education. It should be clear from all of Sheridan's policies around fees and tuition that the Institute's not-for-profit goal and mission is built around lowering financial barriers to high-quality education. To this end, textbooks and fees for student services amenities will be included and are included in tuition fees, rather than being an added burden to the students. The proposal for the Bachelor of Laws with Honours is the result of 4 years of preparations by Sheridan faculty, administration, and board of directors. The Sheridan LLB Advisory Committee was comprised of distinguished members of the legal and academic professions. This was a group of 19 experts representing the higher education sector and the legal profession that included the Honourable Michael Sutherland, former Speaker of the Western Australia Legislative Assembly from 2008 to 2017, and currently a member of the Federal Administrative Appeals Tribunal, as well as senior academics in the relevant areas of law and education. Also attending our board meetings were partners and directors of several Western Australian law firms. Well, one of the members of our LLB advisory board was the late Honourable John Gilmour, a Queen's Counsel and a judge of the Federal Court from 2006 to 2018. He was one of the principal, if not one of the leading members of the advisory committee. A former federal court judge, a member of the Legal Practice Board of Western Australia, he was born, educated, initially practiced law in Scotland. He migrated to Western Australia in 1975 and was called to the Western Australian Bar in 1989. Justice Gilmour practiced as a solicitor and barrister in Perth until 1989, when he joined Francis Burt Chambers. He took silk in Western Australia and Victoria in 1994 and 1996, respectively. A Justice of the Federal Court of Australia from 2006 to March 2018, with his renowned dignity and marked clarity, he delivered almost 600 judgments, spanning the full body of the court's work, including important judgments in commercial law, company law, and trade practices. Justice Gilmour then became a member of Q-side Chambers, acting as senior counsel, arbitrator, and mediator in commercial disputes. He was also a panel member of the Hong Kong International Arbitration Centre and of the Singapore International Arbitration Centre. Justice Gilmour was an active member of the Sheridan LLB Advisory Board. He regularly attended our board meetings with great enthusiasm and generosity. His generous contribution, guidance, and personal support were fundamental for the realization of this project. As a result of being a member of the Legal Practice Board, when the Sheridan LLB proposal came before the Legal Practice Board, he excused himself from the application in order to avoid a conflict of interest. In June 2019, Justice Gilmour actively participated at a major international conference held at Sheridan on the subject of religious freedom in the context of human rights and fundamental freedoms in general, particularly freedom of speech and freedom of association. He opened our historical event by introducing the keynote speaker, distinguished Emeritus Professor William Wagner, who is a former federal judge in the United States of America. The patron of our conference was the former Prime Minister, John Howard. Justice Gilmour had the utmost desire to see the LLB program come into fruition. He made numerous recommendations and proposed important amendments to the Sheridan LPB application, which were gladly accepted and unanimously approved by members of the board comprised of distinguished lawyers and academics, including Emeritus Professor Gabriel Moens. On this special occasion, Sheridan would like to honor Justice Gilmour's life and legacy, and we are very honored to have the presence of his beloved wife, Marcia, and children. And I have a gift to give to you, and thank you very much for the wonderful legacy of your deceased wonderful husband. His legacy will never be forgotten, and of your family in general. Thank you very much for your presence. I have a gift to you. Thank you very much, and really I feel very touched because this man was a an example to everyone here who had the privilege to know him. He was a godly man, and we definitely need to have more judges like John Gilmour to bring light, to be salt and light in the legal profession. We'll have to talk a little bit about the next person who I should honor, Emeritus Professor Gabriel Moens, and he is donating, as I say, his personal library to Sheridan. He's an active member of our advisory committee. Professor Moens is with his wife, Edith, here, and we are very honored, Professor Moens, Gabriel, my friend, for having your presence. Professor Moens has made an extraordinary contribution to Australian education. Not just in Australia, by the way, overseas, teaching and mentoring thousands of students. He substantially enhanced the employment opportunities of his students and relentlessly created educational opportunities for every single one of them. Gabriel has always been very generous towards his students. Many of his activities were not paid, by the way, and went far beyond his call of duty. Professor Moens has made substantial and sustained contributions to Australia's arbitration community, chambers of commerce and media. At the University of Queensland, Professor Moens is described as a legend because of his exceptional teaching skills and his willingness to further the educational achievements of his students. He's the legendary coach of the victorious William CV's arbitration teams, coaching his students to success in Vienna and Hong Kong on numerous occasions. In 1999, Professor Moens received the Australian Award for University Teaching in Law and Legal Studies. In 2003, the Prime Minister of Australia awarded him the Australian Centenary Medal for services to education. He was named the International Alumnus of the Year by the Pritzker Law School of Northwestern University, 2019. In June 2019, he was appointed a member of the Order of Australia for services, outstanding services to the law and to higher education. Professor Moens is not only an exceptional teacher and researcher, but also a most efficient administrator who served as Dean of Law at Murdoch University for nearly 6 years and as Vice Chancellor for 3 years. He also served as Professor of Law and Head Graduate School of Law at the University of Notre Dame and as Garrick Professor of Law at the University of Queensland. In the meantime, he found the opportunity, the time to actually write more than 50 academic books. Probably reaching 60 now, I might not be entirely updated. He is the author, co-author, editor, and co-editor of Law International Business in Australasia, Federation Press 2019, The Constitution of the Commonwealth of Australia, LexisNexis 2016, Arbitration Dispute Resolution in the Resources Sector, Springer 2015, Jurisprudence of Liberty, I like the title of this one, LexisNexis 2011, Commercial Law in the European Union, and so forth, In fact, we would spend the whole night just talk about his academic publications. In 2018, I had the privilege of editing a book called A Commitment to Excellence, Essays in Honor of Emeritus Professor Gabriel Moens, that was published in 2018. This is a collection of articles by national and international scholars in honor of Professor Moens, who was celebrating his 17th birthday that year. It was wonderful to see so many manifestations of love and appreciation by some of the most brilliant members of the international legal community, both academic lawyers and legal practitioners. For example, Suri Ratnapala, Emeritus Professor of Law at the University of Queensland, who is widely recognized as one of the greatest legal philosophers and constitutional law academics in the nation, stated, and I quote from Suri Ratnapala, Professor. Professor Moens is a long-time colleague, friend, and mentor, a man of boundless intellectual ability and energy. He was an inspiration to students and colleagues, and who was an extraordinarily generous person with his time and resources. He was the master of the inspirational lecture, with the rare quality of sustaining unwavering student engagement with the most complex topics. So it's really a privilege and gives me a great honor to be attending this event and to have the opportunity to explain the importance of Professor Gabriël Moens to academia in the legal profession. We have even, I have the privilege to have written some books with Professor Moens, and you have copies, I don't know if you still have, of the latest book produced by Professor Gabriël Moens, written by him, called Foundations of the Australian Legal System. But above all, I must say on a personal level that he is like a father to me, I must say. I have a profound love and admiration for you, Gabriel. And I think your legacy will never ever be forgotten as well. And I can tell you that to have you as an inspiration for my work made a world of difference. I wouldn't be living in Australia, I wouldn't be here if it were not for the fact that he coached me, he brought me from the other side of the world to be able to work with him, and to this I am indeed eternally grateful. I can say that Professor Moens is always a very charismatic figure. All the students have absolutely always loved him, and his legacy at Murdoch and other places will never ever be forgotten. I have learned so much from you, and I have a gratitude, a debt of gratitude for the rest of my life. Thank you very much. Our next speaker is the Right Honourable Basil Zempilas. He's the Lord Mayor of the City of Perth. Basil was elected the Lord Mayor in October 2020. He became the 18th Lord Mayor, joining local government after a successful and ongoing broadcasting career in television and radio. Basil is an extremely charismatic figure, and everybody tends to really love him, and it's very good to have your presence here, Basil. Thank you very much for honoring us, and after his talk, he is going to give us also another honor, that is to unveil the plaque that opens the law school. Thank you very much.
Much, Professor. Good evening, everybody. I've got to say, I don't often get overwhelmed, but tonight, standing here behind the lectern, I feel just a little bit overwhelmed. I am not a professor, in case any of you are wondering. I'm also not a legal graduate, although, Professor Moens, I am a graduate of Murdoch University. And a couple of years ago, I was honoured by being named and awarded with Murdoch University's Distinguished Alumni Award. Now, I should note that when I graduated from Murdoch University back in 1991, I was not a distinguished alumni. However, a successful career that can follow can get you up the rankings a little, it seems. So, as I often say to my friends and colleagues, it's not how you start, it's how you finish. And I was honoured to be able to receive that award. To all of the distinguished guests in the room, thank you for having me here tonight. It is a great pleasure to be here, and I too acknowledge the traditional owners of the land upon which we meet, the Whadjuk Noongar people of Western Australia. Can I thank Professor Zimmermann for his invitation and for his very warm words, and to the many friends that I see in the room. It gives me great pleasure to be at any opening within the City of Perth, because the City of Perth is on a journey of renewal and regeneration, rebirth, a reboot. And to see over the last 3 years, the journey that we are on beginning to come to fruition is something that really pleases me, and I know pleases everybody in Perth. Our capital city should be treated with respect, it should be held in high esteem, and it's been my great pleasure to be a part of a council that is helping restore that civic pride that we would all like to see in our capital city.
As long as there's no 15-minute cities.
Well, there's a bit of that as well. I've learned a few things tonight, by the way, Professor. For example, I've learned that you draw a crowd wherever you go. I've learned that you're a very accomplished speaker. And I've learned that if ever found in this venue. The numerals 1, 0 and 6, 7 are going to come in very handy. So commit those to memory, everybody, especially if the speeches go on long, because you might need them. Just briefly, I want to say that I feel at home here. I feel at home because of the great qualities I see in the people in the room, the great qualities that this institution stands for. Higher education is something that is very important to our community, as is a sense of family, and I see that around me. But also, I feel at home because the Zempilas family called Northbridge, where we are, home when they arrived from the Greek island of Augusto almost 100 years ago. And my grandfather owned and operated the Town Hall Fruit Palace in Barrack Street, directly opposite the Town Hall. I never knew my grandfather, his name too, Basil Zempilas, or Basil Zempilas also. I never knew him, but it's a great honour to think that when I was sworn in as Lord Mayor at the Town Hall, it was in the building just behind me that my grandfather, who I never knew, had worked hard to provide opportunities for the generations of the family that would have followed. My parents brought me up with 3 very simple principles. They always told me to work hard, to use common sense, and to do the right thing. And those values, very simple family values, how important they are. And I have always found that if applying those simple, common sense values to my life and to my career, it's amazing how far you can go. And as it turns out, it's amazing how when those values are applied to decent people's lives, how well things can work out. And I note that common sense, which is at the core of those family values, and common decency are values which we should never forget. They are important. It is important for us all to do the right thing, to use common sense, and not to allow common sense to be beaten or defeated. It doesn't need to be much more complicated than that. And as a leader now, I'm thrilled to be able to apply those values. I'm thrilled to be able to see the regeneration and the rebirth and the relaunch of the city of Perth. And I want to say to you and your team, Augusto, congratulations. To bring a new higher education centre of learning into our city is something that we all benefit from. It's something that enhances our community. It enhances our environment. It brings the right sort of people with the right sort of commitment into our city. And that is what it's all about. And to all of you for being here tonight, congratulations for the roles that you have played. And for supporting your friends and the very learned people at the front, I say well done. And to the students, where are the students? The students were the West dressed like, they were the people dressed like they're going to the footy. You can always tell the students. But to the students, can I say welcome to the city of Perth. Welcome to Sheridan and the Institute of Higher Education. And thank you for bringing your energy, your commitment, your inquiring minds, your aptitude for learning, and everything that we know that vitality brings with it into our city. We are better for having you among us.
Yes. Yeah.
So finally, ladies and gentlemen, let me say congratulations to everybody involved. We know it takes a village, doesn't it? These things do not happen overnight. They do not happen easily. But anything worth doing in this life is worth a good fight. And I say congratulations, well done. And it's fabulous to be here tonight to officially be able to open next door the Professor Gabriël Moens Law Library. Thank you for having me, and good luck to everybody who will study here at Sheridan. My congratulations.
Well, this is an important moment of tonight. The Lord Mayor, great friend, is going to be giving us now a great honor of unveiling the plaque, opening the Professor Gabriël Moens Law Library. So we will proceed to the other room in order to... Yes. I have a gift to give to a friend.
everybody. Well, everybody, Professor, come on forward. Thank you very much. My job is a very pleasant one, but it gives me great pleasure to officially open and declare, from this day forward, the opening of the Professor Gabriël A. Moens Law Library. Congratulations.
Now we can proceed to the...
Can you go on the other side for
So
a
the
photo
other side?
first?
Yes, of course. Take photos.
You go, Basil. This side more. Oh, you can take it.
There we go.
All right. Okay, ready.
After look at Chris.
One more. Oh, yes, Chris.
Yeah, this is for you.
Okay, 1, 2, 3. Beautiful, thank you so much.
Thank you, everyone. I'm sorry I have to go to the next. Thank you very much for having me. Congratulations. Thank you very much. Thank you very much. Well done. Yeah, you too. Oh, yeah, thank you. Paul's got it.
Yeah, Paul's got it. Thanks, Paul. See you.
No, just be honest to take a photo of you and Gabriel together. Oh, that would be nice. Take one for the two of you together. Or do you want to take one of Gabriel first? Yes. And then I'll take one of you together. I'll take one of you together. Like this.
Can I borrow you for a second? Yes,
That was our librarian. Processing all the books.
Okay, 1, 2, 3, and again. Cool. Thank you.
One more.
Yes. I'll get one of you just by yourself. One more? Yeah. You want to do it? Yeah.
Do you want a photo? I'll take it for you.
Yeah, thanks.
Perfect. I got two.
I'll jump in there.
My pleasure. Good. There you go.
First more? It's all right. Of course.
I think that's perfect. And then, yeah, if you want to. Thanks so much to Basil. You're amazing. Well done. Thank you. Congratulations.
Of course, yes.
It's a
We showed you. You're the first I remember that. Professor Moens is freezing, right? I was actually. We get started. We're going to Right, Gabriel, we're going to get started, sir. Yeah. Do you want the star of it?
Well, we will restart. Thank you for your patience, and I have to say that the next speaker is one of the most prominent barristers in Western Australia, Warnick. He practices in the fields of corporate, commercial, and resources law. Before joining the bar in 2013, Leigh spent many years working as a partner in major commercial law firms, where he gained extensive experience in the fields of mergers and acquisitions, corporate governance, and major resource projects. He has been recognized by Best Lawyers Australia in the field of corporate law, corporate governance, and mining law. Leigh also has some 20 years experience, even more, as a director of listed public companies. Leigh is one of the authors of Thomson, Warwick, and Martin Commercial Contract Clauses, Principles and Interpretation, published by Thomson Reuters. He was appointed as Senior Counsel last year. It's an honor and a privilege, Leigh, to have you here with us. Thank you for coming. Thank you.
Thanks, Augusto. That was mergers, not murders. Hosts on the best, colleagues and friends, I'd like to add my acknowledgement of the traditional owners of the land, the Whadjuk people, because I know that this land was and is important to them. This land right here. So I pay my respects to their elders, past, present, and emerging, and I always think that the emerging elders are the ones that we really need to focus on, because they're the people of tomorrow. So it's an honour to speak today, to acknowledge Professor Moens and his generous gift of this library, to look back on his distinguished contribution to the legal profession, to look back on the work that's been done to get Sheridan Law School to where it is now, and also to look forward to what this law school can achieve in the future, because establishing a new law school is a huge challenge, but it's also a really exciting opportunity. But just before I launch into talking about the library and the law school, I'd like to take a moment to acknowledge the family members of the late John Gilmour, who are here with us tonight. I knew John as a barrister and as a judge. As a judge, he didn't always agree with my submissions, but he was always firm and fair, and you knew where you stood with him. John was a big man in many ways, and he was a leader in the community of Christian lawyers in Perth, and we do miss him. And so to this library, it's a wonderful gift, and very appropriate that it's going to be named in honour of Professor Moens, not only because he's the donor, but because of his inspirational contribution to the process of getting the Sheridan Law School up and running. And I know that's been a long road already, and I'd like to acknowledge Augusto and Joshua, Darren Smith, and the board members of the Sheridan Institute of Higher Education, the whole team who stuck with this vision, brought it to the point where it's just about to spring into life. And I also know that all the way along that long road, the support of Professor Moens has been a source of strength and inspiration. Now, I just met Professor Moens for the first time tonight, but I feel I know him quite well because a couple of years ago, Augusto gave me this book, which is called A Commitment to Excellence. And the book contains, as Augusto said earlier, a series of essays on legal topics, all written in honour of Professor Moens. But it also contains an introduction by Augusto with a biography of Professor Moens. Having read that bio, I can see why the title of the book is A Commitment to Excellence. You know, excellence is a really easy word to say. It kind of trips off the tongue. Tell me what excellence is. See, defining excellence is not so easy. Let me talk for a moment about what I think excellence is. Unfortunately, I don't really know much about excellence in legal education. Obviously, I'm a product of legal education myself, but that was quite a long time ago. And from the little I can remember of it, I can only offer two speculative observations about excellence in legal education. First, legal education is excellent if it not only teaches legal principles, but it teaches students to think. And I think of those two things. Teaching students to think is probably more important because you can always look up the legal principles, but you must know how to think like a lawyer. And secondly, I think legal education is excellent if it gets students interested. You can talk about teaching them to love the law, but that might be a bit over the top. So let's just say that an excellent law school should turn out students, or at least a majority of students, who are interested in law and motivated to get out there and practice law. So I'm not usually averse to speaking about subjects I don't know much about, but I do think it's probably enough for me to say about excellence in legal education because I'm amidst experts on that subject. Let me turn to a subject I do know something about, excellence in legal practice. I had to think a lot about this when I was in law firm leadership, trying to design effective programs for continuing professional development. And I came up with a definition of excellence in legal advice. And in case you all need it, here it is. Excellent legal advice is legally correct, practically relevant in the client's circumstances, and delivered efficiently, meaning it's clear, on time, and within budget expectations. So how is that going to be relevant to the Sheridan Law School? Well, obviously a law school can teach students to be legally correct. But can I make a plea on behalf of the legal employers of Perth, and perhaps even more importantly on behalf of the future consumers of legal services in Perth? Please don't neglect the other aspects of excellence in legal advice. In teaching students to think, please teach them to think practically about what the client needs, what the client is thinking, what the client is expecting. Please teach them to communicate, and you know what the biggest part of communication is? Listening. So there's a whole level of insight there that makes a difference between clumsy and excellent in being a lawyer. But there's also something else, and something that's even harder to define, and that's the framework of values that operates as a constant subliminal influence on lawyers and it conditions their approach to practicing law. In nearly 50 years of practicing law, I've seen a lot of different behaviours from lawyers. A lot of different behaviours, signalling different value sets behind the behaviours. Now, some lawyers have admirable values, but there are also lawyers whose dominant value is the accumulation of wealth, believe it or not. There are also lawyers whose dominant value is self-aggrandizement. There are lawyers who have succumbed to cynicism, become dominated by their cynicism. Now, those are the negative ones, but please understand, Law exposes practitioners to a lot of negative behaviour. It can easily pull practitioners into a realm of negative values and negative feelings. That's why the incidence of depression and other forms of mental imbalance is so high among lawyers. So my hope for Sheridan Law School is that it can equip students with a value framework that will start out positive and stay positive. It will give them real resilience to withstand the negative pressures of legal practice. I expect that some of you will remember the old hymn based on the Pilgrim's Progress. The line that always stuck with me is, "Whoso beset him round with dismal stories, do but themselves confound, his strength the more is." That hymn was about the pilgrim who is motivated, strengthened and supported by the principles that Jesus taught, which of course centre on love. And as John tells us at the very beginning of his gospel, Jesus set the example. He was full of grace and truth. So I hope that that will be the differentiator for Sheridan Law School. I know that it will unashamedly adopt Christian principle as its value framework. No one can guarantee that graduates will turn out with a value framework built on love, grace and truth, because like the rest of us, they'll be only human. But if they're shown the value framework, if they're taught law in a law school that models the value framework, then they can make an informed choice about the kind of lawyers that they want to be. Because I can tell you that out there in the real world, law meets life very quickly. And very often, life and law meet in a context of anger, hostility, obsession, greed. And lawyers who are taught law against the background of Christian ethics should be able to see a choice. When they bring law into contact with the lives of their clients, they don't have to escalate the obsession. They don't have to escalate the hostility. They can choose to practice law with grace and truth. And yes, even with love. Sounds idealistic, right? But I know that it's these ideals that have brought Sheridan Law School along the path that has brought it to where it is now. So all this work is happening to create a law school that offers something different. You know the exciting thing? I think we're pushing on an open door with this. Because young people want to create a sustainable world. And they want to gain satisfaction from what they do. Well, in my opinion, there's no greater source of satisfaction than being of authentic service to others. That was one of the things that Jesus taught. The whole message of Jesus about life, about how we live, was a message of sustainability. Jesus taught about strong, sustainable relationships between human beings. Live that message, you start to change the world, working out from the square metre where you stand. So just in conclusion, let me return to Professor Moens and his gift of this library to the Sheridan Law School. Reading what Augusto wrote about Professor Moens, one passage struck me, and here is that passage. Despite these impressive accomplishments, Gabriël remains a friendly and humble person. The combination of competence and humility is what makes him so unique and special. So I hope that the law school that grows up around this library will be unique and special for the same reasons. It will turn out students who combine true competence with authentic humility. I hope it turns out students who will be leaders of change. And maybe they'll lead change by the big breakthrough things that they do. But maybe not. Maybe maybe they'll change the world just by who they're being every day. Competence, humility, grace, truth, and underneath those behaviours, driving those behaviours, love. That's what the Apostle Paul wrote to the Corinthians. When love drives behaviour, that is the most excellent way.
This is a small token of appreciation. Thank you very much. God bless you. It was a very touching message. Thank you very much. And I must say that the chair of the LD is present, the advisory board, Stephen Simpson, and his absolutely lovely wife, Sheridan. Thank you very much for your presence. Thank you. So the next speaker is Lorraine Finlay, a good friend of ours. Lorraine is an Australian Human Rights Commissioner. She commenced her term as a Human Rights Commissioner on the 22nd of November 2021. Prior to joining the Commission, Lorraine has worked as a lawyer and an academic specializing in human rights and public law. Her most recent roles have been as the Senior Human Rights Trafficking Specialist with the Australian Mission to Asia and as a law academic at Murdoch University. In her academic role, Lorraine has lectured in areas including criminal law, constitutional law, and international human rights, and has been recognized with a number of national and university awards for her outstanding teaching and research. Before moving to academia, Lorraine worked as a state prosecutor with the Office of the Director of Public Prosecutions in WA and at the High Court of Australia, initially as a legal research officer and later as a judge's associate. Lorraine has a collection of many academic titles, and I have been really privileged to be able, together with my great friend Joshua Forrester, to write a couple of articles and books with Lorraine. Joshua, can you stand up? Joshua is the lead author of No Offense Intended. He is working here with us at Sheridan, so we are taking this project very seriously indeed. Joshua is one of our law lecturers at Sheridan. It's really a privilege to have Lorraine with us. One of the authors of No Offense Intended, and an advocate for freedom of speech and academic freedom in general. Lorraine, it's an honor to have you here. You're such a wonderful friend. Thank you for your presence.
Well, good evening all. That was such a kind introduction, and it is such a pleasure to be back home in Perth and to be able to join you all tonight. I'd like to echo the comments of earlier speakers by acknowledging the traditional custodians of the land, the Whadjuk people, and extending respects to elders past, present and emerging, and also echo the acknowledgement of all of the distinguished guests in the room that have been given earlier tonight. But you know, I'd add that when I look around the room, I see so many distinguished people who, in their own spheres and through their own lives, have added so much to our community. And the fact that you are all here tonight gives me reflection on two things. The first is obviously the enormous regard that everybody here clearly has for our guest of honour, Emeritus Professor Gabriel Moens. And the second is the belief that we all have in the amazing contribution that the Sheridan Institute of Higher Education has already had and will continue to have in the future. Those two things have drawn an incredible group of people together this evening. Now, in my time that I have here, I wanted to make some brief comments about both of those. I first met Gabriel Moens in 2008. At the time, I was working as a High Court Judge's Associate, and I accompanied my judge to a speech that he was giving in Perth at the Murdoch University Law School. At the time, I had a very straightforward plan. I was going to finish my associateship, return to Perth, and recommence work as a state prosecutor, which I was expecting to be what I did for the entirety of my legal career. After my first conversation with Professor Moens, I remember ringing my husband and saying, I think I'm changing careers. And I think I'm going to become a law academic. And he said, what's convinced you? And I was reflecting on the conversation and realised that Professor Moens was very honest with me. He said I'd be expected to work incredibly long hours for pay that was not equivalent to what I would get at a commercial law firm, and probably under pretty terrible conditions. But what he inspired me with was the vision that he had for the law school. And he had a vision of a law school where ideas would flourish, where students would be inspired not just to get a degree, but to be exceptional and to think about the contribution that they were going to make beyond the law school. And he had a vision for a place where we all knew that we were contributing to something bigger than ourselves and creating something that would actually make a real contribution to the broader community. That's a vision that I see reflected here today in what the Sheridan Institute of Higher Education is doing, and a vision that I see reflected in the plans for the law school here. Now, I could stand here tonight, we've already heard a long list of accomplishments and a reflection on Professor Moens. He's one of Australia's most distinguished legal academics. He's held prestigious academic appointments. He's won numerous awards, including being appointed as a member of the Order of Australia for services to the law and higher education. But that doesn't at all capture the true significance of Professor Moens' contribution. And when I was reflecting on what that significant legacy is, I was drawn back to a comment that I don't know if he'll even remember, but that was made some years ago to a speech I had him give to some law students at a careers fair. And what Gabriel said on that day was that what you needed to think about was the type of person you wanted to be. And that really there were two types of people in the world. There are the people who work to build something, to create something, to leave a positive legacy. And then there are people who try to undermine that, who try to bring things down, who try to destroy rather than build. He said that being the former, being a builder, a creator, is much harder than being somebody who simply undermines or destroys. And Professor Moens is somebody who has always devoted his life to building, whether it be developing and enhancing the institutions that he's part of, whether it be creating opportunities and encouraging and enriching the individuals that he's worked with or taught, or whether it's been inspiring people with his vision of what we could all actually achieve if we committed to being part of something bigger than ourselves. He's an extraordinary person, but of all of the honours that could come his way, I actually think attaching his name to a law library is perhaps the most fitting. Because to my mind, a law library embodies so many of the defining qualities of Professor Moens. A love of ideas, a belief in the importance of knowledge, and an unwavering commitment to excellence. We live in an age of smartphones and search engines, and in this era, there are many people, and I'm ashamed to say many lawyers, who perhaps think that libraries, and even law libraries, are relics of the past. That they're no longer needed because we have information at our fingertips. This is a grave mistake. In my views, libraries not only play a vastly underappreciated role in our communities, but even more importantly, libraries within educational institutions sit at the very heart of any place that wants to put the search for knowledge at the centre of its reason for being. And in today's world, I would say that the search for knowledge and truth is perhaps more important than at any time in human history. We live in an age where we have more information available to us instantaneously than ever before. And yet, we live in an age where I fear we actually have less interest in ideas. We live in an age where we prioritise feelings over facts, where we search for affirmation rather than wisdom. And people are less willing to engage with different perspectives or to challenge themselves by engaging with difficult ideas. In this environment, having individuals and institutions who value ideas, who see education as the key to advancing the common good, and who are committed to seeking wisdom and truth, is more important than ever before. That's why I think tonight is so important. The opening of the Professor Gabriël A. Moens Law Library is a tangible illustration of the commitment that the Sheridan Institute of Higher Education has to these important principles. And my hope is that this library will reflect its namesake by inspiring those who use it to seek knowledge, to value ideas, and to always strive for excellence. Thank you very much.
We certainly have a gift for you as well. You certainly deserve it. It was wonderful. Thank you very much. Lorraine is, I always learn so much from you, Lorraine. You are talking about being humble. Huh? You are a very humble person. And I always tell my friends that it was a true privilege to have you as my colleague at Murdoch. Talking about Murdoch, the next speaker is another excellent friend of mine, Professor Phil Evans, Professor of Law at the University of Notre Dame. He's also the principal of P.J. Evans and Associates, lawyers, arbitrators, mediators, and adjudicators. He is a graded arbitrator, accredited mediator, and registered adjudicator under the Construction Contracts Act. And in 2013, he was appointed by the Western Australian government as a sessional arbitrator to resolve workers' compensation disputes. In 2001, Professor Moens joined the College of Law at the University of Notre Dame, where he was a professor and associate dean of the School of Law, director of graduate law programs, and the course coordinator of the graduate certificate in building and construction law. In 2010, he joined Murdoch University and was subsequently appointed professor of law, deputy dean, and dean of the law school, before leaving to take up a foundation professor appointment at Perth University Law School in July 2013. Professor Evans is also on the editorial boards of a number of very prestigious law journals. And in 2012, he received the Murdoch Law Students Lecture of the Year Award. In 2013, he received the Vice Chancellor's Award for Excellence in Teaching and the Australian Award for University Teaching. I can say that Professor Evans has always been also very important for my career. I was the Associate Dean for Research at Murdoch at the time that Professor Evans did a brilliant job as the Dean of the Law School at Murdoch. So it's such an honor to have you here, Phil. We work together so well, and I must say that I have learned so much from you as the leader of our team at Murdoch. Thank you very much. Thank you.
I'm ahead. I do like to start by acknowledging the traditional owners and also to acknowledge Mr. Darren Smith, Executive Dean of the Sheridan Institute of Higher Education, Commissioner Finlay, Professor Moens and Mrs. Moens, Professor Zimmermann. Firstly, thank you for the opportunity of being here this evening. Whilst we're here to formally acknowledge the opening of the Law Library and the contribution of Professor Moens to legal education, I suppose, putting it in legal terms, it's so obvious that it goes without saying in terms of Professor Moens' contribution. And there's probably very little for me to say and add. Apart from the day we met, when Professor Moens walked across the courtyard in 2004 at Notre Dame, and I looked at him and I thought, I don't know how I'm going to get on with this person. He turned out to be the most wonderful mentor and colleague, and like Augusto, I thank you, Gabriel, for where I am today. At the same time, Professor Moens has always acknowledged, for the many years that I've known him, that he's not done this alone. He's done this with the long-standing support of his wife Edith, who is with us this evening. I was wondering when you're fourth on the list what you can really say that hasn't been said before. So what I might do is just try and value add to the words of Leigh and Augusto and also Lorraine. I want to talk about three things. Why I believe law libraries are so important in legal education, and the importance of the law librarian in legal education. And the third thing I was going to talk about was, do we need another law school? I've changed that now to, do we need a different law school? Why I believe libraries are so important to legal education. It's well acknowledged that libraries, law libraries, are critically important in legal education. They're also fundamental in supporting our justice system by making legal information available to all, which is extremely important in maintaining a just and democratic society. This has been acknowledged by the Council of the Australian Law Deans, standards which states, and I'll read verbatim, the law library has a distinctive role in the university and is appropriately described as the lawyer's laboratory and can be regarded as similar to the need for scientists to have essential equipment in a laboratory setting. The vital role of the law library in the law school's research, teaching and service can be achieved not only through the physical library, not online, but through the availability of an active and engaged law librarian. And I've noticed Gazelle's... But regardless of any administrative requirements, we're well aware of the impact that law libraries have. It's immeasurable. Sadly, it's a fact not often supported by vice-chancellors who look covetously at the space of law libraries and attempt to impose some online alternative. Those of you in higher education will know what I'm talking about. Now, as Lorraine picked up, whilst online resources do provide a valuable aspect in terms of legal education and practice, there's significant advantages in the printed materials. And in fact, recent years, print books have known a real resurgence. Now, there are many lawyers here, and I suppose you're looking, is there some reasonable apprehension of bias on my place? I have some evidence. Here it is. Readers of print books absorb and remember more content than readers of e-books. Print readers score higher in other areas, such as empathy, immersion in the book, and understanding of the narrative. Scientists believe this effect is related to the tactile sensation of holding a book in your hands. Print books are easier on the eyes. Considering that many tasks require us to stare at a computer screen all day, it's wise to give your eyes a break whenever you can. Electronic books can cause screen fatigue, blurred vision, redness, dryness and irritation. And anyone who's just read 80 law assignments on their computer will know exactly what I'm talking about. With print books, you're likely to get more distracted. Not surprisingly, people who read e-books and information from computer screens tend to get sidetracked more easily. Now, it often intrigues me that I seem to spend more time actually browsing than actually processing what I'm reading. With a print book, there's no chance of being distracted by links and heading down an internet rabbit hole. In my only case, I can start browsing, looking for articles dealing with the effect of COVID on commercial contracts, and how I end up reading about electronic vehicles has got me beat. Also, this is probably the best. Print books amplify the joy of reading. A recent international study showed that 92% of students preferred actual books that they can hold and touch and leaf through whenever they please. So Lizelle, if you're up there, I think your career is well and truly established and safe. More importantly, though, is the law librarian. The importance of the librarian, as we've seen, is specifically referred to in those called academic standards. Law schools train lawyers, but so do law librarians. They play such an important part in helping students to gain knowledge by quickly referring them to sources, to current legal resources, research platforms. More importantly, or just as importantly, they assist academic staff by keeping up to date with developments regarding the law and legal research, and allows us to be more effective with our time. As I said, it not only saves us time, it allows us to access information quickly. They're often the first port of call in supplying the information that we need in our role as academics and researchers. In thinking about this evening, if you were to ask me on a personal note, who have been the most influential in helping me in my legal studies and as a law academic, and again I acknowledge my wife Diane is here this evening, it's been the law librarians. And some of you here will know these people that I refer to with great affection. With Anne Greenshields, the former law library at Murdoch University, and Mr. Bruce Bott, who for many years was the law librarian at the University of Notre Dame, and I thank them both from the bottom of my heart. Closer to home, I've had the opportunity to meet and talk with the Sheridan law librarian, Lizelle Smith. Apart from being a highly qualified academic librarian, amongst other things, it was clear to me that Lizelle had a passion for her role and will be invaluable in assisting both students and staff. Lizelle more than clearly satisfies the Council of Australian Law Dean standards that a law library must have an active and committed and engaged law librarian. Just lastly, it's a question that many legal academics and others have been asking, is do we need another law school? It's the first thing that comes to mind when Sheridan is proposing a law school. The question is not so much, do we need another law school, but do we need a different law school? And the answer is yes. Why? We need a law school with the heart of the law school's the law library, where pastoral care is not just words on a mission statement, but is the foundation of the law school, where the elective units are not only there as a variety of topics to reflect contemporary legal issues and specialities, but also in picking up what Mr. Warnick had to say as well, the moral issues in such a way as to prioritise those ends that are worth pursuing, together with the rights and obligations that ought to govern human conduct in a Christian context. And where the teaching staff are not only skilled in communication, listening, calibrate, all of those things, more importantly, have empathy and patience, and where real value world learning and commitment to ethical practices occur, and the development of lifelong love of learning. I've had the opportunity of having a look at the proposed LLB course structure meet with some of the staff, and also work with Professor Zimmermann. And under Professor Zimmermann's guidance, I'm sure that Sheridan University will be able to reflect the values here that Sheridan Law graduates will be. Lovers of truth, seekers of wisdom, innovative thinkers, effective communicators, and independent learners. And I also would add that empathy is perhaps the most important part of legal practice. This was brought home to me a few years ago when I was asked to appear before the Senate Committee Inquiry into Insolvency in the Construction Industry. When I completed my submissions, Senator Cameron, who was the chair of the committee, commented that the committee had noted the work that I'd done in helping the industry be aware of its rights and its obligations. But then he said this: have you ever considered the personal effects resulting from insolvency, depression, mental breakdowns, marital breakdowns, suicides? And as I was embarrassed to say that I had not, but I do now. In my lectures, I stress that applying the law to the fact is only one of the issues in assisting clients, and litigation is the last resort. I've got a couple of brief closing statements in typical legal practice, and I'd like to make these. I need some authority, and the authority for these is my desk diary. Firstly, there is no greater calling than to teach. Secondly, no lawyer can afford to be ignorant of the Bible. Next, firstly, let my judges and lawyers be polite. If they know a little of the law, so much the better. And finally, in closing, books are the most quiet and constant of friends. They are the most accessible and wisest of counsellors, and the most patient of teachers. Thank you very much.
That is for you and your wife.
Thank you, Augusto. Both of you. Oh, yes, thank you.
Thank you, Professor Phil Evans. It's been a wonderful time, don't you think? We chose excellent speakers, I must say. And of course, we still have one speaker to address this distinguished attendance. And this one is a very special one indeed. He is the person whose the library has been named after. And I must say that I'm here talking to you thanks to him. As I mentioned before, I would not be living in Australia if it were not for Gabriel. I remember when he called me to return to Australia. I had done my PhD at Monash, and I had gone back to have my normal life again. And I got an email from Gabriel saying, I need to talk to you as a matter of urgency. And I thought that I had failed my PhD. I was the examiner of my thesis, and I was really worried about contacting. I thought I might have done something really serious now for the examiner to contact me. And then the first thing he told me is if I knew the result. And I told him, no, I don't. I have no idea. He said, well, I have sent my examination already, and your PhD is really good. What a relief when I listened to that. It was like, now I can breathe. and then he invited me to be an academic at Murdoch. He gave me 24 hours to make a decision. I was on the other side of the world. It's funny that I was contemplating to be an academic in America. I had some conversations with Liberty University in America. And I'm here because of him. So I'm eternally grateful to you, Gabriel. The more than that, he's like a father to me. So it's wonderful to have you here and to have learned so much from you. Thanks for coming, and now it's you to address this very distinguished crowd. Thank you very much for your presence.
Good evening to all of you. I would like to acknowledge the leadership of the Sheridan Institute of Higher Education. I would also like to acknowledge the Law Advisory Committee members, the distinguished speakers I have listened to tonight, Professor Augusto Zimmermann, who is my friend, and you, ladies and gentlemen. One of the advantages of being the last speaker is that I can be very brief, because everything that needs to be said has already been said. So I will only speak for about 3 hours. No, I'm not going to do that because I'm not going to impair your sanity, obviously. But when Professor Zimmermann told me that the library of the Sheridan Institute of Higher Education would be named after me, I was frankly alarmed. I said to him, surely a building or even a room in a building is only named after a person who is already dead. And I stressed the fact that I'm not yet dead. And indeed, I'm still involved in many different projects. And I do not intend to depart this life prematurely, I told him. And yet, he clearly did not understand what I was telling him, because he told me that he was absolutely adamant that the law library was going to be named after me. Well, here we are. Welcome to the Gabriel A. Moens Library of Law. Of course, tonight we are celebrating not only the naming and the opening of the law library, we are also celebrating the accreditation of the proposed law school by the national regulator, namely TEXA, the Tertiary Education and Quality Standards Agency, for a period of 7 years, which is the longest term an institution could possibly be accredited for. And as you have heard, we are now waiting for professional accreditation, a final signature by the Legal Practice Board, and hopefully in the beginning of next year it might be possible for the first batch of law students to be admitted to the Sheridan Law School of the Sheridan Institute of Higher Education. Tonight, as you know, we are also celebrating launching a book that Professor Zimmermann and I have written. In fact, the book was only published just a few days ago by LexisNexis. It is a book about the legal system of Australia. It is written for first-year law students, but I promise you that all of you here would be able to read the book with benefit, because it is a good book that you can learn from and you will enjoy reading the book. I'm sure Professor Zimmermann may have more to say about this later on. And tonight, we are also honoring the legacy of the Honourable John Gilmour, QC. John was a devoted member of the Law Advisory Committee, and he made many suggestions for improving the documents which would be sent to the Legal Practice Board and TEXA. And as a consequence of his recommendations, many revisions took place for the better. And John will be very much missed by everybody. Tonight, I would like to say a few words about the mission and the vision of the new proposed Sheridan Law School. The Committee of Australian Law Deans, known as CALT, requires all law schools to have a mission statement. And of course, the Sheridan Law School obviously will have a mission statement. It will say that one of the most important tasks of the law school is to provide an excellent legal education to its students. It is a legal education which will prepare the students for a career in law, for a career in the public and private arenas. And it is an education which will focus on the rule of law and the importance of the rule of law for the maintenance of a mature legal system. I would also like to mention that it will be the mission of the law school to promote, to enhance the critical thinking skills of students, a point that one of the speakers has mentioned earlier. When it comes to critical thinking, this is a skill which is noticeably absent at the moment in many law schools in Australia. And yet, critical thinking skills are absolutely necessary so as to ensure that people are able to think independently, so they are not slavishly committed to the narrative that the government may tell them, or policymakers or trendsetters. They are able to make their own decisions. You know, I tell my students in discussions, when we discuss social, moral, economic and financial issues, that they are entitled to disagree with my arguments. But I tell them, if they disagree with my arguments, they have to be able to tell me why. Because why is possibly one of the most important words in the English language. Because it imposes an obligation upon students, upon all of us, to explain our arguments, to explain where we stand on a particular issue. And this is very important. So that is part of the mission statement of the new law school that is in the process of being developed. The law school obviously will also promote the research skills of students, their ability to write well. And by the way, this is another skill that we are losing in our society. I know so many people, including some lawyers, who are no longer able to write properly. And there are many reasons for this. In fact, I could tell you more about this if I were to have time, but as I said before, I'm not here to impair your sanity. I'm trying to be brief, and I can tell you this is a major challenge for me, but I will try to do that. And of course, it is also part of the mission of the new Sheridan Law School to be a force for good in society. But I would like to say a little bit more about the vision as opposed to the mission of the law school. A vision statement is a forward-looking instrument because it describes the aspirations of the new law school. This law school aspires to be a religiously affiliated law school, a Christian law school, if I may say so. A Christian law school which is based upon and inspired by Christian principles. Yes, you are applauding, but what I'm saying is not really revolutionary at all, because, as some of us know, until the end of the 19th century, many, if not most, lawyers in Europe and throughout the world admitted freely in their writings and speeches that the legal system is based on Christian principles. These Christian principles have always been part of the legal system, and even today, many of the principles that we have are based on Christian roots of the legal system. Even in the 20th century, Justice Denning, Alfred Denning, was motivated by the Christian principles of the law. So what I'm saying is nothing new, it is not revolutionary, it is merely a statement of fact. Of course, in the United States, we have many Christian law schools. Some of them have been mentioned by Professor Zimmermann, and some of them have Baptist origins. But in Australia, there are very few law schools that have a Christian ethos. And this is because in Australia, we have developed very much a secular society. Especially during the last 20 to 25 years or so, Australia has become secularized, and it is becoming more and more secularized every day. I might give you a few examples. Now we have same-sex marriage, which was introduced in 2017. Every state has abortion legislation. Every state has end-of-life euthanasia legislation. And of course, there is a frantic legislative activity going on with regard to gender dysphoria issues and conversion techniques and gender identification. We have affirmative action. We have climate change and zero emissions policies and laws. All of this has happened in the last 20 to 25 years. And in universities these days, they now teach critical race theories. And critical race theories, of course, as we all know, is a neo-Marxist philosophy, according to which white people are responsible for the plight of black people in the world, And of course, there is also the bureaucratization of the relationship between indigenous people and non-indigenous peoples. All of this has happened during the last 20 to 25 years. I would assume that many migrants who came to Australia prior to 2000 would no longer recognize the country they are living in today, because the country has been dramatically transformed into a different society. And this is because of the adoption and the promotion of social engineering legislation by successive governments, coalition and Labour. So our society has been transformed. I'm saying this because as a consequence of secularization, this new law school will have many, many challenges to try to maintain and support its Christian ethos and values. And yet, it is a challenge which, in my opinion, needs to be met. I'm always reminded of Prime Minister Winston Churchill, who always told people that a challenge actually creates opportunities, and they are opportunities which we might exploit if only we have common sense and the ability to think critically, which is so important for a successful society to exist. And there is one more thing that I would like to mention in this particular context. Most of you would probably know that exemptions which are available to religiously affiliated schools will very likely be removed. It is a process that was started by the previous government, but this government, the present government, has enthusiastically taken this issue a little bit further. As the law now stands, it is still possible for a religiously affiliated law school to appoint people whose ethos and values aligns with the values and ethos of the employing institution. Clearly, if it is no longer possible for an institution, especially a religiously affiliated institution, to appoint people who are willing to support the ethos and the value of the institution, then the religious character of the school will disappear over time. So there is a major challenge here that obviously religiously affiliated schools will have to deal with. As some of you may know, the government has asked the Australian Law Reform Commission to tell the government how the exceptions will be removed or how they can be removed. So what I'm saying is the government has not asked the Australian Law Reform Commission whether the exemption should be removed, but instead has asked the government, the Australian Law Reform Commission, how they should be removed. So that means that the government obviously has already made up its mind as to what will happen with the exemptions. You know, I would like the exemptions to be removed, provided they are also removed as far as political parties are concerned, which is probably not likely to happen very soon. Now, in conclusion, because I think most of you are hungry now, I would like to make a few more comments, just 2 or 3. The first thing is, yes, I have donated part of my library to the Sheridan Institute of Higher Education, but I have many more law books which I have not yet donated because I'm still using them, because as I said, I'm not yet dead. And I'm still making, hopefully, substantial contributions to the social issues that are being discussed in this country. But I promise you that the day will come that all the books that remain in my possession will also be donated to the Sheridan Law School. I just don't know whether that will be before or after my demise. The second point is, I have indeed a successful legal career. You have heard about this, but you know, the person who is really responsible for my success has always been my wife, Edith, because I was able to devote my career, without having to bother about the education of the children, without having to bother about the upkeep of the family, the household, and so on. I was free to really work on my career, and that was particularly important to enable me to achieve under the conditions that we happen to be in. So thank you very much. The final comment. During the last 1 hour and a half, I have been listening very attentively to all the comments that have been made by the speakers about me. And they were all very positive, of course, highly positive, highly flattering, you know. And I'm very grateful for that. However, if these comments were to be made by my wife, you would find, you know, that these comments would be more nuanced. But perhaps slightly more believable, you know, and frankly closer to the truth. You know, listening to all the comments that have been made, you know, one could well come to the conclusion that there is only one thing missing from my profile, and that is elevation to the sainthood. And I'm sure that is going to happen very, very soon. So, ladies and gentlemen, I would like to thank you for your presence tonight, and I do hope that the Gabriel A. Moens Library will serve the community and the students for a long time in the future. Thank you very much and have a happy Easter.
We have also a gift for you, but I know that Edith must get the credit also.
Thank you. Thank you.
Look, I know that it's getting late, but I must say that it is a historic event. It's a very important one indeed. It's a privilege to be working at Sheridan. It's a privilege to know people like Gabriel and my fellow colleagues, friends, people who I really love. And it's such a good time to be in your presence, because I know that nobody can accomplish anything without the help of friends. And I must say that I wouldn't be able to do half of what I do, even 1/3, or perhaps nothing could be done without the help of my friends. And certainly the help of God. So it's very important for us to bear in mind that if you do the right thing, we must rest assured that we are going to obtain the victory. And the victory is for the well-being of the community. And Gabriel has been so important in this project, as the Honourable Justice John Gilmour was as well. We are very grateful for John, for what he did for us. And this is for them, the law school. It's for to honor the legacy of those who have done so much for the community. I just feel that this is the beginning of a great adventure for Sheridan. We have so much to fight for, to do things for, and to, above all, honor God. It's wonderful to have you here. Now we can have a bit of fun, having a good catering. God bless you, and enjoy your time in the catering. Thank you for your presence. Thank you.
Yeah, it's just the old legs. It's just the old legs. I wasn't in the way too much, I hope. Never.
Newcastle's our city, and so you're all taking
I cannot tell you that
I'm not taking any You know, you take any time at all. Just your that's the one I really want.
headline which will echo through
I think I need to stay just
That is an iconic duo. Yeah. Thank you. And a great video as well, might I add.
my mentor here. I wouldn't be where I am if it were not for this man. I'm so grateful to you. I think that we had a good time here. It was a good event. I was looking at him. I started to get confused. Well, let's have drinks. I need, as you can see, you know. So good to see you, Stein. Very good. How have you been? Yeah, I'm all right. I'm so good to see you again. It's been so long. Yeah. How are you going?
My faith has been crossed. And so,
thanks for helping.
He's a good man. Yeah, no. And I try to guide him without telling him what to do.
You film that? God bless you. As I was saying to your lovely wife, our fight for freedom and truth is tied with our people. High academic credibility like yourself, so thanks so much. I hope there is another time.
Okay, sure. You say goodbye to Augusto. You say
John, God bless you. Thank you so much. Thank you. Thank you.
Catch up for breakfast and stuff.
Yes, let's do that. I really would love to see you again.
Yes, to catch up.
Yeah, I'll give you a call and then you organize something.
Yeah, I'd love to.
Thank you.
Would you like to say any words, Augusto and Dr. Moens?
Look, it's an honor to be with my friend Gabriel, and I wouldn't be able to do what I have done and even to be in this country if it were not for Gabriel.
Well, I was just asked tonight by one of the participants, that I only gave you 24 hours to make a decision. That was a very harsh decision.
Yes, that's right. I was given only 24 hours to make it. It was harsh, but it was the best decision I have ever made.
That's right.
Thank you, Gabriel.
Yes, and we're grateful you're here in Australia rather than America, and all thanks to this great man here.
Oh,
yes.
Great man. I'm a European peasant.
We are both peasants. Just try to do our best and honoring God.
Excellent.
Thank you.
Be a nice ending for the video, of course.
Yes.
Thank you.
God bless you guys.
Obrigado.
You might be able to sell this, you might be able to make a profit.
Of course, yes, like a pay-per-view, yes. Pay-per-view, yeah.
Pay for each view.
Yeah, that's right.
Thank you.
Yes.